Hi, I'm Chad with Move Forward Guitar. This lesson is from our course Music Theory 1. All the lessons for this course are free on our YouTube channel, so you can follow right along with the playlist, or you can look in the description below for links to the rest of the lessons. To accelerate your learning though, I highly recommend that you download the corresponding workbook and eGuide. To learn more about the workbook and eGuide, click the link on the screen or look in the description below. Welcome to Music Theory 1, Lesson 3. This is part 2 of 2 where I'm talking about the layout of the fretboard. So in the last lesson we started looking at the fretboard layout, and again the reason we're doing this is because this is music theory for guitar, and even though music theory is the same for all instruments, it's really important to be able to visualize it on your own instrument, which is going to make it a lot more practical for you and easier to use right away. And the first thing we're going to look at in this lesson is hopefully a review for you, and if it's not, again I recommend watching our beginner courses, but I think it's important to at least go over it quickly for any of you that might not know. So the first thing we're going to look at is the tuning of the guitar, meaning the names of all the open strings. And we're talking about standard tuning, and don't worry about what standard tuning means really. There are other tunings that you can tune your guitar to, but standard tuning is by far the most important and the most common you're going to come across. And you don't need to worry about other types of tunings until you get more advanced. So just realize that what we're talking about is called standard tuning, and it's the most common way you're going to come across a guitar being tuned. And the most common way you'll tune your own guitar, unless down the road you really learn to like other types of tunings which are less common. So the tuning of your guitar, starting with your 6th string, is E, A, D, G, B, E. So E is your 6th string, A is your 5th string, D is your 4th string, G is your 3rd string, B is your 2nd string, E again is your 1st string. So the 6th string and the 1st string have the same letter name. And there's mnemonic devices you can use to help you memorize that if you don't know them. And those are just taking the letters of each of these note names and making words with them so it's easier to memorize. And that could be elephants and dogs grow bigger eventually. Another one is Eddie, 8, dynamite, good, bye, Eddie, and there's tons of other ones. You can come up with your own. You can look them up on Google. There's a lot that you'll find, and whatever works for you, it doesn't really matter. It's just so you can memorize those letter names. So next important concept to understand is that the 12th fret are all the same note names as the open strings. So if we're on the 6th string, open E, if you're played an open string, play that E, and then you're to fret the note on the 6th string and the 12th fret, that would be an E as well, no matter what string you're on. So A on the 5th string, open string, it'd be the same on the 12th fret on the same string through all of these. So whatever happens with your open strings happens in the 12th fret. And even though they're the same letter name, they're what are called octaves apart. And I mentioned octaves, I think, in the first lesson, but I didn't go too deep into them. And that just means that they have the same name, but they're a different pitch. So if I was to strike this E and then this E, you'll be able to hear that this one down here is lower in pitch than this one. And an octave is just double or half the frequency of each other. And frequency is just the times per second the sound wave oscillates, and higher notes oscillate faster. Don't worry at all about what that means if you don't understand that. You can do some research on your own if you care. It doesn't really matter, especially for now. Just realize that this E is oscillating faster than this E, which means that this E is double the frequency of this E, which means that this E is going to sound higher in pitch than this E. And an octave is 12 half steps apart. So if you're to start on one string and count the frets, if we're going from the open strings to the 12th fret, that's obviously 12 frets apart because these are in the 12th fret. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So octaves are 12 frets apart or 12 half steps. So if you started on one note, went up 12 half steps, you're an octave higher. Or if I started on this note, the higher E, and went down 12 half steps, I would be an octave lower. Same letter name. Or if we were to look at a piano, if I was to start on this C, obviously there's not frets, so we're talking about half steps. I'd go up 12 half steps to this C. That would be an octave higher. This C is an octave higher than this C. And you would count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Because you would just count all the white keys and all the black keys. And I showed you with the open strings to the 12th fret, but that applies to any note that you fret on the fretboard. So if I was to fret on the 6th string, the first fret, and go up 12 frets or 12 half steps, I'd be on the same note again, just an octave higher. And these are actually called F notes. That's not important for now, but both of these are Fs, and this one is an octave higher than this one, no matter what note I started with on the fretboard. If I went from the 2nd fret to the 14th fret, though they're the same notes, an octave apart. No matter what string, if I was on the 3rd string, 3rd fret, and went up to the 3rd string, 15th fret, those are the same note, octave apart. And the same on piano, it doesn't matter what note I start on, if I have enough room to go up 12 half steps, I'm on the same note, just an octave apart. So if we were to look at all the E's on your guitar, and these are just all the E's that I've drawn out as far as this fretboard goes. You might have more if you're playing an electric guitar, you have more frets than what I've drawn here, but I'll explain why that doesn't really matter in these diagrams anyway. That's something I'll talk about in this lesson. But for now, these are all the E's that I can draw on this diagram. They're the only E's that you would find. And you can see this E to this E is an octave apart, this E to this E is an octave apart, this E to this E is an octave apart, and so on. Any place that you have 12 frets that you can go up. This one I don't have 12 frets that I can go up, I've run out of room. So on the same string I wouldn't have it an octave apart, but you actually have octaves on different strings. So for example, this note to this note is an octave apart. This one right here is an octave higher than this one. And that's because this note is actually the same note as this note, which is the same note as this note, and you can see here that's 12 frets apart. And so that's when the guitar can get really confusing, because you have notes that are the same note name and the same pitch, and those are called unison notes. So an octave is the same name but different pitch. A unison note is the same name and the same pitch. And you don't have that on the piano because the piano is horizontal. Just like on a guitar string, I don't have any unisons on the same string, because if I struck one note, anywhere I go, it's going to be a different pitch. Same with piano. If I struck one key, for example, if I struck this D, anywhere I go to find another D, it's just going to be a different pitch. I have to strike this note twice for it to be a unison. So that's why the piano is easier to visualize. You don't have unison notes. But on the guitar you do. So that means a lot of things you can play on the guitar, you can actually play in multiple spots on the fretboard, and it's going to be the exact same pitch, meaning you have multiple options to play the exact same thing, and you don't have that on the piano, so that can make it more confusing. And they will sound a little bit different just because the string gauge changes the sound a little bit, and your guitar would have to be perfectly intonated and perfectly in tune for it not to sound different at all, but even the string gauge will change that. But it still is the same pitch. Just realize that if you play something on the guitar in one spot, you might have multiple places that you can play it. And not all notes have unison notes. For example, this E doesn't have any unisons, but this E has 2 unisons. This E has 3 unisons, because all of these are the exact same note, same pitch. This one on my diagram has 1 more unison, so these are the same note, same pitch. And we'll really dive into this in the next course, but that's just important to understand. That's another reason why it takes some time to really visualize the guitar. That's where this horizontal and vertical comes into play. You have octaves on the same string, but you also have octaves on separate strings, and then you have what are unisons, which are the same note, same pitch, which have to be on separate strings, and that can make it confusing. So I have octave, octave, unisons, and then from here to here is an octave, and these are unisons, which would mean that from here to here is an octave, from here to here is an octave, from here to here is an octave, and from here to here is an octave. But don't let that confuse you. I'll really make it simple in upcoming lessons and upcoming courses. Just be aware of that for now. And I've only talked about one octave, which is 12 frets apart, but there are multiple octaves on the guitar. Most guitars are about 4.5, a little over 4.5 octaves apart. Pianos, full pianos are 7 octaves. So they have a lot bigger range as far as pitch goes. The guitar only has under 5 usually. So that means 24 frets apart is 2 octaves, which on this diagram I don't even have room to draw that out on one string. And most guitars you don't have that except from your open strings to your highest fret, and that's on electric guitars. And not all electric guitars have enough frets for that. But from here to here is 2 octaves. So this one right here is 2 octaves higher than this one. This one to this one is an octave apart, which would be 12 frets, which would be the same note as this. This note is the same note as this note. But from here to here is an octave apart, which means that from here to here is 2 octaves apart, which you can see right here. This was, I said, was 2 octaves apart from this one, and these are unisons. Or from here to here on this diagram would be 3 octaves apart, which would be the same note as this. So from here to here is 3 octaves apart, or from here to here is 3 octaves apart, and these are unison notes. Again, that seems really confusing right now, probably overwhelming. Don't worry about it. We'll really dive into it and make it simple in upcoming lessons. Just be aware of it for now. Octaves are the same note, different pitches. Unisons are the exact same note, exact same pitch. And octaves can be on one string or they can be on different strings. Unisons can only be on different strings. And then just one more thing for this lesson. Here are all the natural notes through the 10th fret. You can see these are all just drawn through the 10th fret. They're just the natural notes. I didn't draw the sharps and flats just so it's easier to visualize and it's not messy. So whatever happens below the 12th fret, just to make sure you're clear on this, is happening 1 octave higher from the 12th fret on. So all of these notes are the same as these notes, but these right here in the 12th fret are an octave higher than these, which are your open strings, and then everything else is the same. So right here in the 1st fret are the same notes that are in the 13th fret, but the notes that are in the 13th fret are an octave higher. So you can see that right here, again, is just right here, an octave higher. And how many frets your guitar has will determine how many of these notes get repeated. This diagram ends right here on this F, which is this F an octave lower. Well, this one's an octave higher than this one. So that's all I could circle. But if you have an electric guitar, you're going to catch more of these notes up above here. So it actually makes the guitar easier to memorize than it first seems, because you only have to memorize these notes and then realize these notes are just mimicking what's happening down here, but an octave higher. And again, we'll really dive into that in upcoming lessons, but that's something to be aware about with your guitar layout. That everything that happens from the open strings through the 11th fret is just happening from the 12th fret on and is mimicking what's going on down here. And that actually makes it a lot easier to visualize your guitar fretboard. So that's more about the layout of the fretboard. In the next lesson, I'm going to talk about melody. Look in the Music Theory 1 workbook for step-by-step guidance on how to retain this information and what to do next. And remember, all the charts and diagrams are in the Music Theory 1 eGuide for you to reference anytime.